The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty market square as Adana arrived, her large clay pot balanced effortlessly on her head. Her movements were deliberate and graceful, her wrapper tied tightly around her fat waist, a faded but clean apron covering her simple dress. Unlike the other vendors who called out to potential customers, Adana remained silent, her dark eyes scanning the market with a calm intensity. Ola and her friends huddled closer, their whispers sharp and laden with curiosity and barely concealed jealousy. They watched as men from all corners of the village, farmers, traders, young and old, began to form a line at Adana's stall even before she had fully set up. "Look at how they rush," Ola muttered, her voice thick with frustration. "My husband used to enjoy my jollof rice, but now he comes here every single morning." Another woman, her wrapper slightly askew, nodded in agreement. "Mine too. And he pays without hesitation. Have you seen how quickly her pot empties? It's like magic." The aroma was indeed extraordinary, a complex blend of spices that seemed to dance on the morning breeze. Rich, warm scents of tomatoes, peppers, and something else. Something indescribable that made people's mouths water before they even saw the food. The village elders arrived next, their weathered faces softening as they approached Adana's stall. They didn't speak much, but there was a silent understanding between them and the mysterious cook. Each elder would receive a carefully portioned plate, which they would accept with a subtle nod of respect. Rumors had been circulating for months. Some said Adana came from a distant land, others whispered about secret family recipes passed down through generations. But no one truly knew her story. She appeared in the village about a year ago, set up her stall, and transformed the local culinary landscape without saying more than a few words. Young children would peek around their parents' legs, drawn by the intoxicating smell. Women would pause their market negotiations, captivated by the steaming plates of jollof rice and stew that seemed to promise comfort and satisfaction with every serving. Adana remained an enigma, quiet, focused, her hands moving with a precision that spoke of years of practice. She never looked directly at her customers, yet she seemed to know exactly what each person wanted before they spoke. As the morning progressed and the market bustled around her, Adana continued cooking, her large pot never seeming to empty, her mysterious culinary magic continuing to draw people from near and far. The evening settled over the village like a heavy blanket, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Ola trudged home, her basket empty, her spirit deflated. The market had been merciless today, not a single item sold, while Adana's stall continued to draw customers like moths to a flame. As she entered her modest compound, she saw Ugo sitting outside, his work clothes still dusty from the day's labor. The weariness in his posture was offset by a curious contentment that made Ola's blood simmer. "What would you like to eat?" she asked, forcing a semblance of cheerfulness into her voice. Ugo looked up, a distant smile playing on his lips. "I'm not hungry. I ate at Adana's stall earlier. Her food was extraordinary. You should try to cook like her sometime." The words landed like stones, each syllable a sharp reminder of her failure. Ola's hands, usually steady from years of market trading and cooking, began to tremble slightly. Her husband, her provider, her partner, seemed more enchanted by a stranger's cooking than by her years of dedicated care. "Her food?" Ola's voice came out smaller than she intended. "You can't imagine," Ugo continued, oblivious to the storm brewing in his wife's eyes. "The flavors, the way everything just melts in your mouth. I've never tasted anything like it." Anger rose within Ola, a tide of frustration and wounded pride. She had always been known as a good cook in the village. Her family had never gone hungry. Her meals were always prepared with love and care. And now, a stranger arrives, and suddenly her worth is measured against this mysterious food seller. Without another word, she retreated to her room. The darkness welcomed her, a companion to her tumultuous emotions. She lay on the bed, her body rigid, her mind racing with thoughts of Adana and her magical cooking. Ugo followed her, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" he asked, concerned about softening his voice. "Why aren't you happy?" Silence was her only response. She turned her face to the wall, letting sleep claim her, hoping unconsciousness would wash away the day's humiliation. Outside, the night settled in. Crickets chirped their evening song, a counterpoint to the unspoken tensions brewing in the small village home. Adana's presence hung in the air, an invisible force that had begun to reshape the delicate social fabric of their community. The market stirred to life with the first light of dawn. Ola arrived early, her determination burning brighter than the rising sun. She had positioned her stall carefully, hoping to catch the early morning crowd. But something was different today. The market felt empty, eerily quiet. Ola's eyes constantly darted towards the spot where Adana usually set up. Minutes passed, then more minutes. Where was she? A flicker of hope sparked in Ola's heart. Perhaps today would be different. But then, just as Ola was adjusting her wares, Adana appeared. Magnificent and unhurried, she balanced her large clay pot with the grace of a woman who carried centuries of culinary secrets. People seemed to materialize from nowhere, forming a line before she had even fully set up her stall. The aroma began to spread, rich, complex, almost hypnotic. Spices that seemed to whisper promises of comfort, of memories not yet remembered. Ola watched, her anger rising like steam. Her own stall remained untouched, a stark contrast to the bustling crowd around Adana. No one even glanced her way. Children, elders, young men, all were drawn to Adana like iron to a powerful magnet. When Ugo appeared carrying something in his hand, Ola's frustration boiled over. "What are you doing?" she demanded, rushing towards him. "We have food at home. Why are you coming here?" But Ugo seemed not to hear her. His eyes were fixed on Adana's stall, a strange glazed look replacing his usual expression. He joined the line, moving mechanically, almost as if pulled by an invisible force. Ola stood frozen, watching her husband shuffle towards Adana. The morning market continued around her, but she had become invisible. Her stall, once a source of pride, now looked like a forgotten corner, while Adana's space pulsed with life and desire. Something was happening, something beyond simple cooking, and Ola was determined to uncover the truth. The mid-morning sun beat down on the market, casting sharp shadows between the market stalls. Ngozi approached, her colorful wrapper swaying with each step. Her basket balanced carefully on her hip. She was expecting to see the usual bustling market scene, traders calling out, people negotiating prices, a vibrant exchange of goods. Instead, she found an unsettling silence, broken only by the murmur of voices around one single stall, Adana's. Ola's stall stood completely abandoned, her carefully arranged goods looking sad and untouched. Vegetables were beginning to wilt, fruits losing their fresh shine. It was as if the market had forgotten Ola existed. "What is happening?" Ngozi muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the scene. Every single person seemed drawn to Adana's stall like moths to a flame. The village elders, young workers, mothers with children, all stood in an orderly line, waiting patiently. She spotted Ola standing at the edge of Adana's stall, her face a mixture of rage and desperation. Ngozi could see the tension in her friend's shoulders, the way her hands were clenched into tight fists. "Ola," Ngozi called out, moving closer, "what is going on? Why is everyone only buying from Adana? Why are you not selling anything?" The market seemed to pulse with an energy that went beyond normal trading. The aroma from Adana's pot was unlike anything Ngozi had ever experienced, complex, rich, almost supernatural. The market had begun to empty, the day's trading winding down to its final moments. Ngozi, still bewildered by the strange scene, turned to Ola with a look of determination. "I'm going to ask Adana what's happening," she declared. But Ola's hand shot out, gripping Ngozi's arm. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, just let her sell in peace." There was something in Ola's eyes, a mixture of fear and desperation, that gave Ngozi pause. As night fell, the market square transformed. Most vendors had long since packed up and gone home, but Adana remained. Her large pot still steamed, an impossible warmth radiating from its clay surface, casting soft shadows in the moonlight. Hidden in the brush at the market's edge, Ola watched intently. Her eyes never left Adana, tracking her every movement with a hunter's precision. When Adana finally began to pack up, Ola followed, careful to keep her distance. The night was thick with humidity, crickets singing their endless song. Adana moved with an unnatural grace, her substantial frame moving silently through the darkness. She walked towards the outskirts of the village, to a part where the houses grew sparse and shadows seemed to stretch longer. Ola's heart raced. She watched as Adana approached a house that seemed to blend into the darkness, almost invisible, with overgrown vegetation surrounding it. What happened next would change everything. Adana's hand touched the ground. A bowl of meat materialized. Ola gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle the sound. But it was too late. Adana turned. Their eyes met. At that moment, something shifted in the air. A power beyond understanding crackled between them. Adana raised her hand. Ola felt something invisible wrap around her, silencing her, freezing her in place. The world around Ola became a silent nightmare. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. Her throat burned with the effort, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air, but complete silence enveloped her. Adana's hands, strong and surprisingly gentle, guided her into a small room. The walls were lined with shelves filled with strange containers, dried herbs, roots, unidentifiable substances in jars that seemed to glimmer in the dim light. A single candle flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. A bowl appeared. Meat, dark, rich, unlike any meat Ola had ever seen. The aroma was complex, layered with spices that seemed to whisper promises of something beyond ordinary hunger. But Ola's terror paralyzed her. She refused to eat, her eyes wide with fear, darting around the room. Adana turned away, returning to whatever mysterious ritual she had been performing. Her movements were deliberate, almost hypnotic. The door stood ajar. Freedom beckoned. With a surge of desperate energy, Ola bolted. Her feet, which moments ago had felt frozen, now carried her with incredible speed. She could hear movement behind her, Adana's pursuit, but something prevented the woman from catching her. The night air hit her face as she ran. Darkness surrounded her, but she knew this path. Every step was a desperate attempt to escape the horror she had witnessed. Ugo stood outside their home, worry etched across his face. When he saw Ola running towards him, her clothes disheveled, her eyes wild with terror, he stepped forward. "Ola!" he called, reaching to steady her. She collapsed into the room, body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. Her mouth opened and closed, desperate to speak, but no words came out, only raw, broken sounds of pure terror. Ugo knelt beside her, his hands gentle. "What happened?" he asked, his voice a mixture of concern and confusion. "What's wrong?" But Ola could only cry. The silence that Adana had cast upon her was absolute, a terrifying barrier between her and the truth she desperately wanted to tell. The night pressed heavily against their small home. Ola lay motionless on the bed, her body trembling with silent sobs. Tears soaked the pillow, creating dark, spreading circles that reflected the turmoil in her mind. Her eyes were open but unseeing, replaying the horrifying scene from the previous night, Adana's mysterious meat, the supernatural silence, the room filled with inexplicable jars and shadows. Ugo slept beside her, unaware of her inner torment, his breathing steady and calm. The next morning, Ugo rushed to the market. His sole purpose was to buy food for his wife. At Adana's stall, he moved with an almost desperate urgency. Ngozi spotted him. "Ugo," she called out, "have not seen Ola today?" But Ugo was consumed. He barely heard Ngozi, his focus entirely on obtaining Adana's food. The mysterious cook handed him a steaming bowl, her eyes briefly meeting him with an unreadable expression. Returning home, Ugo offered the food to Ola. "Here," he said, "eat something." Ola stared at the bowl, her eyes filled with terror. Tears began to flow, tracking silent paths down her cheeks. She shook her head, refusing to touch the food. What was more terrifying was watching Ugo eat. He consumed the food with the same dreamy, entranced expression she had noticed before. Each bite seemed to draw him deeper into some inexplicable spell. Something broke inside Ola. She walked out of the room, her movements mechanical. In the corner of their small compound, she found a bottle of poison used for pest control. Without hesitation, she uncorked it and drank. When Ugo emerged, he found her crumpled on the ground, the poison bottle nearby. The village quickly gathered. Whispers began to spread about Ola, the mysterious events consuming their quiet community. The morning after Ola's death hung heavy over the village, a suffocating silence broken only by occasional hushed whispers. Yet at the market, life seemed to continue with an unsettling normalcy. Adana stood at her stall, her large frame immovable, her smile seemingly untouched by the tragedy that had just unfolded. Her pot steamed, releasing that same hypnotic aroma that had drawn people for months. Men, women, even children lined up as if nothing had happened, their movements mechanical, their eyes glazed. Ngozi arrived, her body tense with a mixture of grief and anger. She watched Adana carefully, her eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to challenge the mysterious food seller. The villagers moved around her, buying food, chatting, acting as if Ola's death was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "I will expose you," Ngozi whispered to herself, so quietly that even the wind might have missed her words. "Whatever you are, whatever you've done, I will find proof." Her hands clenched into fists. She knew something was deeply wrong. Ola's sudden death, the strange spell that seemed to grip the village, Adana's unnatural cooking, it was all connected, and she would unravel the mystery no matter the cost. The market continued around her, oblivious to her mounting determination. Adana's smile never wavered. The market buzzed with its usual energy, but for Ngozi, everything had changed. Each time she passed Adana's stall, the woman's serene smile seemed to mock her grief. The villagers continued to devour her food, their eyes vacant, their minds seemingly controlled by some invisible force. Anger burned within Ngozi like a slow-burning fire. Ola's sudden loss of voice, her unexplained death, the village's indifference, it all pointed to something sinister. "I must find the truth," she muttered to herself. The idea of consulting a native doctor grew stronger. Traditional wisdom might uncover what modern eyes could not see. But first, she needed proof. That night, Ngozi concealed herself in the bushes near the market. The evening grew late, the market emptying slowly. Adana remained, moving with her usual unhurried grace, cleaning her stall with deliberate movements. As darkness settled, Adana was indeed the last to leave, and Ngozi followed. Keeping a careful distance, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and determination. The path Adana took was unfamiliar, winding through shadows and overgrown vegetation. Ngozi moved silently, years of village life having taught her how to move undetected. Then she saw it. What Ngozi witnessed stopped her in her tracks. Adana stood in a clearing surrounded by strange implements. And the meat was not from any animal Ngozi recognized. It was red, almost pulsing with an unnatural light. Human meat. Ngozi's mind reeled. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Adana had been cooking human meat, feeding the entire village. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life, her mind struggling to comprehend the horror she had just witnessed. Home became her sanctuary. Collapsing on her bed, Ngozi's mind raced. What would she do? Who would believe her? The entire village seemed under Adana's spell. The night pressed around her, heavy with unspoken terror. The next morning, Ngozi went to visit the king. "Your Majesty," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I have come to tell you about Adana. She has been cooking human meat for villagers to eat. She is not who she appears to be." The king's eyes, deep-set and weary, studied Ngozi with a mixture of skepticism and mild irritation. He had heard countless rumors in his years of leadership, and most were nothing more than malicious gossip. "So what do you want me to do?" he asked flatly. "Everybody likes her food, including me. Are you simply jealous of her?" Ngozi's desperation peaked. "Your Majesty, please listen to me. I saw her with my own eyes." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty village square as Ngozi walked away from the palace, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The king's dismissive response had only fueled her frustration. Her reputation as a gossip and troublemaker was well known, and her accusations against Adana seemed to have fallen on deaf ears. As she approached her small market stall, the familiar scent of spices and roasting meat hung in the air. Her heart raced when she saw Adana walking towards her, a calculated smile playing on her lips. Ngozi's hand instinctively gripped the edge of her market table, her body tense with a mixture of fear and anger. "Ngozi," Adana's voice was smooth, almost honey-like. "I heard you've been talking about me to the king." The market around them continued its usual bustle, children running between stalls, merchants calling out their wares, elderly women exchanging gossip. But the space between Ngozi and Adana seemed to vibrate with an unspoken threat. Ngozi swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. She knew she was treading dangerous ground. The villagers loved Adana's cooking, and her reputation was impeccable. Who would believe the words of a woman known for spreading malicious rumors? "I know what I saw," Ngozi muttered, her voice wavering slightly. Adana took another step closer, her eyes never leaving Ngozi's face. "And what exactly did you think you saw?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implicit warning. The tension between them was palpable, a silent battle of wills played out in the midst of the vibrant, unsuspecting village marketplace. The confrontation near her market stall sent a chill down Ngozi's spine. Adana's threat about Ola, her friend who had mysteriously disappeared months ago, hung in the air like a dark omen. "I will expose you," Ngozi muttered to herself as she walked home that evening, her steps quick and determined. Night fell quickly, covering the village in a thick blanket of darkness. Ngozi's small mud-brick house was quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the distant bark of dogs. She collapsed onto her woven grass mat, exhaustion pulling her into a deep sleep. In her dream, a luminous figure appeared, not quite solid, but unmistakably angelic. The figure spoke without words, pointing insistently towards Adana's distant hut. When Ngozi awoke, the dream's urgency remained burned into her memory. Her grandmother's Bible, a treasured possession kept wrapped in a faded cloth, caught her eye. She clutched it like a talisman, her heart racing as she prepared to venture out. The path to Adana's hut wound through shadowy palm groves and past sleeping compounds. Moonlight cast uncertain shadows, making every rustling leaf sound like a potential threat. Ngozi moved carefully, her breath catching in her throat with each step. Approaching Adana's hut, she crept close to a small window. The scene inside froze her blood. Adana was preparing something in a large pot, and the contents were unmistakably human bones. Flesh, a horror beyond imagination. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ngozi pushed open the door. Adana whirled around, her eyes wild. "What are you doing here?" Instead of answering, Ngozi raised the Bible. Her voice, once trembling, now rang with unexpected strength as she began to recite passages. Something shifted in the air, a spiritual pressure that made Adana's skin crawl. Something was happening. Adana began to shake, her form seeming to waver and distort. "No!" she screamed and bolted from the hut. By morning, the entire village knew, witnesses confirmed Ngozi's account. Adana had vanished, her dark secret exposed. The villagers gathered around Ngozi, celebrating her bravery. She had not just exposed a murderer, she had saved countless lives. "God protected me," she said simply, clutching her grandmother's Bible. The story would be told for generations, how one woman's courage and faith had defeated an unspeakable evil. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and comment at the comment section below.